I'm gonna piss off a decent amount of people with this. Complex. Bourbon is an American-made spirit that's made primarily from corn. It's gonna be a little bit sweeter than rye. It's gonna be not smoky as you would get in Scotch, but it's gonna mix damn fine in cocktails. When we think about making cocktails, we tend to kind of gravitate towards whiskeys that are about 100 proof and about under 30 bucks. They tend to make good old fashions, good Manhattans. When we wanna sip on something that's neat and on the rocks or have something a bit more interesting, we'll tend to come to this side of the spectrum and move up a little bit higher in price range. The starting point for bourbon is 80 proof or 40% alcohol. As you raise that up to about 100 proof, it's actually less water and more whiskey. So what you're gonna get is something a bit more flavorful. What's nice about finding a whiskey like Old Grandad 114 here is that it's at such a high proof that if you pour it over an ice cube and let it sit for a little bit, it's still gonna have the punch that it packed right out of the bottle. When you get down to something about 80 proof, you can notice that it starts to taper off and you lose a lot of that flavor. This is why we prefer higher proof whiskey. If you're standing in the bourbon aisle and you're staring at your phone watching this video right now, here's a couple of my recommendations on what to purchase. First of all, none of these brands paid me to say any of this, and I'm also not even really financially invested in what the hell you choose right now. So I'm just gonna be honest with you. If you want a workhorse that does everything, this is my go-to. Old Grandad 100, it's old, it's awesome, it's affordable as hell, it's great. Now this is its older brother here, Old Grandad 114, a little bit step up in price, a damn good whiskey for the price that you find it. Now a fun little departure from these two is this Parker Heritage right here. What's really cool about this is kind of the new gen of finishing whiskeys in unique barrels. If you can find a bourbon that's been finished in something cool like sherry, rum barrel, in this case a Curacao barrel, that's definitely a novelty whiskey that you can have on your shelf and impress your friends. And this bad boy right here is the hardest thing to find on the planet these days in terms of American whiskey and bourbon, and that's Pappy Van Winkle. You might have to do a back alley deal to find one, but it's kind of cool to have something that baller on your shelf. So if you are starting to become a whiskey collector and you want to look for some fine print information on these bottles, one that I really like to look for is this little line that's down here on the bottom of this label, or sometimes it's hidden on the back and it says, distilled, aged, and bottled by. Now that means that these people from beginning to end, cradle to grave, made this product. And you'll find some products that just say bottled by. That means they're purchasing it from somebody else. Now don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to know where your whiskey comes from, you're gonna need to see that distilled by on the label. And a lot of this stuff is just marketing lingo. You'll see old, you'll see like aged, you'll see the word antique, and most of this stuff is just to kind of lure you in. This is your call. It depends on what you like. You may not love the most expensive one, or you may have a problem because you only like the most expensive one. The best suggestion I can make as a bartender would be, instead of going to the liquor store and dropping all this cash to try to figure it out, find a local bar and start tasting at the bar. That'll give you a good idea of what you like. Look for the proof, look for the age, and maybe you can find your scope down so when you walk into that whiskey section, you can easily make a choice based on some ideas that you figured out. Pretty much any route you go is a safe bet. It's not always true that the most expensive is the best, so go out, pick up maybe a cheaper bottle, because who knows, you might fall in love with it.